You may have noticed that I've moved away from talking about the problems of why the benevolent and kind-hearted government would be trying to, I don't know, push us into ghettos or try to persuade us that we need digital IDs or that 15-minute cities are a good idea in which you can't travel from one part of the city or your town or even your village X many times or without being charged, or why indeed that they want to get rid of diesel and petrol and the myth, of course, that man-made global warming is the biggest challenge that we've got. And of course we've got these ridiculous net zero policies that still the government trot out, and even though most of us now have worked out that this is complete and utter rubbish and it shouldn't be followed at all, because well, we are the carbon that it seems to me that they're trying to get rid of, the dehumanization of our world and the dehumanization of the planet at the same time. Well, we know all these problems now, and many people are continually talking about them and scaring people. And you may have noticed, and moving away from that. I want to look at the solutions, because unless we actually start to think, actually, what do we do about this? Shall we do something different, or shall we just embrace it and stand there like a lump of jelly, totally scared? Or should we actually start to create an alternative universe for us? One of the things I've learnt is, of course, that everything out there in the world, in the public, it seems to me now, apart from us, living men and living women, is all about corporations. Corporations are everywhere. These large businesses, which are more than just your normal sole trader or family or partnership businesses, these are the big incorporated businesses, the huge brand names. But it's even more insidious than that. I've learnt, of course, that even the government itself is a corporation, is a business. There is in fact a corporation called the Office of the Prime Minister. So although we think we're voting for a body of people who are there to do our bidding, who are our servants, we're not at all. We're actually voting in a corporation whose sole business is about making a profit, about getting money, extracting cash from you and I, living men and women. I've learnt that the councils who again we think are a body of people who are really there to administrate and make our life easier for us, are actually a corporation, another body that simply is there to make money. And the thing we know about corporations, of course, is that they're just dead entities. They don't actually exist in a living and breathing way. They have buildings and they have vehicles and they have equipment and they have accounts and they exist in a sort of digital fashion on spreadsheets, but they're not real. They're not actually a thing that, as I say, lives and breathes and has autonomy. The only way corporations exist, really, to do anything is by employing people, living men and women. However, these employees, and some of them get paid by the corporation a lot of money, and others down at the other end get paid a lot less money. But all of these employees, it seems, once you've become an employee of a large corporation, you are effectively a drone, somebody who is now working for this corporation without free will anymore. And we all know what that's like when you try to negotiate with a corporation over a contract, for example, or you go to the supermarket and you say, look, it's £1 and 3 pence. I've got £1, I haven't got the 3 pence. Would you let me off that? And they say, no, it's £1 and 3 pence. In the old days of family businesses, you might go in and say, oh, I'll pay you later. You can't do that because these corporations are dehumanized. They're not human in any sense. They exist and they're exact and they're mathematical entities, but they're dead. And we know that. And so this is one thing now that is very insidious and nefarious across the whole country, that so much of our public life is being ruled by corporations and these boards in which the employees have worked out they can make a lot of money if their incorporation makes a bigger profit. So we have these corporations all over the place, and as I say, they are there to make money. They are the antithesis, if I can say that word, to living men and women who live and breathe in a real world with nature, with the sunshine, with real living and breathing things, with spirituality, with hope and passion and enthusiasm. These corporations are dead entities. So we can either go along with it, and we can see where these corporations and these ideas are going, in which farming itself is being sidelined because we can now make food out of synthetics. And so we can have people living in subhuman lives, working for corporations as drones, being fed by non-real food. We can go along with that. We can say that humans are just not good enough, so we need more technology, these wearables, our mobile phones, these smart meters, these chips that will be put into our heads to help us be more effective and superpowered, apparently, or more drone-like, or more controllable and less human than ever. We could do that. We could continue to pay these fines and work for these corporations. Or alternatively, we could, as I feel now, we are right at the precipice of an experiment that has been going on since the Industrial Revolution, really, but certainly in the last 100 years, and particularly in the last 20 years, in which the technology has got us wrapped up and dependent, and it's so convenient that we've now become addicted to our mobile phones, our laptops, and these wonderful devices that have made our life so much better, apparently, that we're working so hard and paying so much more money for the privilege, and that normal, real things have gone out of the window. We're in this experiment in which all of that now, we've seen the results, that it is actually about dehumanizing us and turning us more and more into robots, into drones, than actually living, breathing, laughing, having joyous experience, having spirituality. And I think now is the time to realize that that experiment, which is being pushed and pushed by some of these globalists who want a one world government, one world corporation that we are all employees in, it's time to say, actually, we needed to do that. Great experiment, but it's finished. It is now dangerous to pursue that anymore, because we are actually living men and women and spiritual beings with bodies. We have blood gushing through our veins. We have brains, we have thoughts, we have minds, we have spirituality. And these dead corporations have no place for any of that. So it's now time to start building an alternative to a world-based corporation. And so how do we do that? Well, we go back in many ways to the old ways of doing things. Now, I know some people will go, but you can't go back. You can't. That's a step back. We must progress. But the progression, as we have seen, is to turn humanity into a one world corporation in which we all become drones, not able to go into the countryside, stuck in our 15-minute ghettos, being fed with synthetic food. We can now see where that progression is going. And I, for one, don't want it. Excuse me, stop the world, I want to get off. And I think many other people who I've met now are in that same feeling, that actually we don't want this, this is not for us. Unfortunately, the young people who have only known this environment, this way of doing things, are so wrapped up in it, they cannot see what benefits the past may have had for us. But I'm of that generation where I have one leg in the analog world and one leg in the digital world. And whilst there's some benefits, of course, to the digital world, it's made making these YouTube videos so much simpler than having to go and buy a roll of film and waiting for it to be developed and then somehow get people to come to a cinema to watch the ideas and opinions that I might have. And of course, some of the technology is incredibly useful, but it has been manipulated in a way, and I think we're all beginning to realize that is not actually beneficial for living men and living women, of which you and I are. We are not dead entities, we are not corporations, and we are certainly not drones. And we are going to make sure that we don't become drones. And so if you go back to the 1940s, there was a time where corporations were there and they were building up their momentum. But there was a time when we had so many independent shops, sole traders, small garages, small shopkeepers, doctors' surgeries, doctors who knew the family. We had a time when things worked. There was some larger corporations and the beginnings of the supermarkets were coming in. But it was at that point, really and truly, we should have said, stop. The progression doesn't need to go any further. We have a system that is about humanity. It is about service. It is about caring. It isn't just about making a large profit for the few and not a lot for everybody else. Excuse me. Now, I grant you that during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we saw the big factories and we saw how people were abused working 12-hour shifts and children as well working in the looms or going down the mines. That, in many ways, was a big warning to us that progression into this new technological world is a danger, and we need to work out how to prevent that from going to where we are today. But we are where we are today, and we need to think, how do we build an alternative world? Now, since I made the video in which I was talking about supporting independent businesses, excuse me, a gentleman got in touch with me and said, I have a spare space on my server. We could run a web page or a website in which we list all the independent shops, all those people who are growing food and want to be able to distribute that food, people who have lots of different businesses, perhaps making household things that we all need, that we get from supermarkets ordinarily, toothpaste, hairsprays, combs, matches, firelighters, saucepans, all those sort of everyday things that we might have to go and buy from the large chains, from corporations. Now, there will be small independent businesses who are struggling and need our help. And if we can list all those places, and we have a place a bit like that very large corporation that I've mentioned before, that's based on a river beginning with the letter A, that is doing that. But that money is not going really to those independent businesses anymore. It's being sucked out into the world of the corporate. And we don't want to be in that world. Somebody also came forward and said, well, I have an app. I could develop the app that also helps work out who are the independent shops. And of course, all this needs promoting, and it will start off small, and there'll only be a limited number of people on there who are doing things like your soap nuts so that you can wash without having to use these big commercial brands and give them the money. And this is one of the things we really need to try and do, is to boycott the supermarkets who've become, as you know now, dehumanized. They're getting rid of the staff who are there to buy from, who know the products. They're getting rid of the staff. We're told that we need to use these machines, operate them yourself machines. I forget what they're called on the top of the tongue of mine as I speak now. And we can see the security. And some are now only allowing you to go into the shop because they are determined to get rid of cash. And cash, of course, is that private transaction between you and the person you're buying from. And now the more that it is put onto an app and it's on a line and you can't get into the shop without a QR code, without your mobile phone, then you have a dead entity, a shop for more drones and dead entities. Well, we're living men and women. If you remember back in the old times, people worked from home. The government keeps telling us we've got to work from home in these pandemic years. Well, actually, we used to work from home a lot more. People's front rooms were their surgeries, were their offices, were their shops. They were places where people would go. I live in a terraced house in a two up, two down terrace house in a small parade of houses, and opposite me are others. And if I go back and look in the old Kelly's directory from 1840s, 1870s, 1920s, that sort of time period, these houses were occupied by people, of course, but they ran their businesses. They were sole traders. There was a cobbler's down the road. There was a furniture restorer up from me. People ran their little businesses, little dentists, little selling all sorts of things, a dairy, all from their front rooms, all from their homes. And this is really where we need to go back to get away from these large chain stores, these big brands, these corporations in which the money is siphoned away to who knows where. We need to get back to an alternative where people are maybe buying perhaps in bulk, say those soap nuts I was talking about. I could buy hundreds of them and invest in them, and then people could come to me when they want them in my own community and say, oh, Richard, I'd just like 1 kilogram of soap nuts, please, so I can do my washing. And you say, yes, no problem. And you sell again in cash, because even though fiat currency and cash is, the fiat currency cash is not the best method because it's a debt-based currency, but it is a private transaction and nobody need know about it, just you and I, whoever is buying the stuff from me. And so if we're doing that, we are pushing away, we are rejecting the big corporations, these dead entities, these non-entities run by people who are there to just extract a profit from us. So we could do that again. We could build up these alternative small structured businesses where cash is being used. But where you can't and you have to buy online, then perhaps that's where things like some of these new money technologies like the Bitcoin are beginning to become perhaps a bit more useful, where the money again is still in the private, and you might then order from these small companies. I believe somebody said to me, he says, I've got a server at home. I've been in the IT business for a long time. I want to build an alternative to Facebook or to WhatsApp groups or to Telegram so that it is on a private individual's server rather than a large corporation that can be monitored and watched and spied upon. And I think this is the way forward. We're slowly building an alternative lifestyle. It doesn't mean that we all have to move away and live remotely from one another. We can still be in our towns and villages. It's just we're living in the private alongside these dead entities until eventually we make these dead entities completely and utterly irrelevant. And I think that's part of it. New money will come. People are developing systems for new money, and that is exciting. But in the meantime, we must use our cash as much as we can because it is private, and avoid the supermarkets and their surveillance and all of that. Of course, we are not going to be able to get everybody to follow what we do. As I said, younger people only live in the digital. They do not know the benefits of the old ways, of the personal ways, of a spiritual connection with humanity and all of that. And so we can't save everybody. But for the moment, we need to be the shining examples. It isn't about living in a hippie commune, but it is about living in a private, alternative humanity way that is meaningful to all of us, and that we open our homes and we embrace each other to live together in a community that works for us living and breathing men and women, and not for those dead entities of the corporations. And finding these solutions, as we start to think and we start to practice this, will grow and grow, because men and women need each other. We need to laugh. We need to cry. We need to hug. We need to embrace. We need to touch. We need to be together. And we need, more than anything else, a humanity that you don't get from a world pushing all these dead concepts that come from the corporations. And we will do it.